My best friend is pregnant with my husband's child, and they conspire to kill me for my inheritance. But I never thought betrayal could feel like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, until that moment when the truth hit me like a fist. I'm Maya, born in 1989 in Lagos. Back when I was 29, I discovered the most unimaginable treachery. My closest friend, the woman I trusted with my secrets, was carrying the child of the man I loved and married. I felt anger, disbelief, a kind of hollow emptiness that made my stomach churn. But then something happened. A small, quiet voice inside me said, "You're not finished yet. Watch and wait. Learn everything." Today, at 34, I'm finally sharing this because I want you to understand what it means to endure betrayal and turn it into strength. If you're listening, drop your shocked face below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for the full story. The first time I noticed something was off. I caught my husband whispering on the phone late at night. His voice was hushed, clipped, but familiar enough that my gut twisted into knots. I pretended to sleep on the couch while he tiptoed to the kitchen. Still murmuring, my best friend's name floated in the conversation, and suddenly my world tilted. I felt like the floor beneath me had given way. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I stayed quiet, letting the storm rage inside me while I pieced together the fragments of their deception. It wasn't just infidelity. This was a conspiracy, a plan to take everything I had, including my life. That realization made my hands shake, and yet, in the same breath, I felt a dangerous calm. I knew I had to act, and not out of rash anger. I started by observing. Every detail mattered. The way my husband's phone buzzed constantly, the small glances my best friend gave when she thought I wasn't looking, the way they met in cafes under the pretense of innocent errands. I memorized patterns, times, movement. I recorded conversations when they didn't notice, scribbled notes in the margins of my planner, and took mental snapshots of each scene. At first, I wondered if I was losing my mind. Was I imagining the betrayal? But the evidence accumulated faster than I could keep track of, and my initial shock slowly transformed into calculated awareness. I understood that to survive this, I had to be clever, careful, and patient. My friends would joke about my obsessive attention to detail, saying I reminded them of Aunt Mabel trying to bake cookies at midnight. And I smiled quietly, knowing my vigilance now was no laughing matter. There were nights I sat in the living room, pretending to sleep while listening to their whispers through the thin walls, learning about the extent of their plan. The cruel intimacy of it made my stomach churn. They spoke about my inheritance as if I were already gone, calculating, dividing, dreaming. They had chosen their roles with care. My husband the executor, my friend the manipulator, and their child as the ultimate leverage. I felt rage rise in me like fire, but I let it simmer, let it harden into steel. I learned not to trust my own impulses, because they could be seen, could be turned against me. Instead, I became a shadow in my own home, silent, watching, memorizing, cataloging every movement, every hint, every breath. The day I confirmed the pregnancy, it was like a knife twisting inside me. My husband left his phone on the kitchen counter, and I couldn't resist. I found the ultrasound image saved in his messages, along with a note to my friend. "We have to move quickly before she notices anything." My vision blurred, but I swallowed the scream I wanted to release. I had to appear normal, unshaken, human. Panic would ruin me. So I walked into the living room, smiling, pretending to sip my wine as if I had no clue. They believed I was unaware, and that belief was my shield. I started imagining all the conversations I would need to have with the police, the lawyers, the witnesses, but I couldn't act yet. Timing was everything. I also had to protect myself immediately. I switched the locks, installed discreet cameras, and even took a self-defense class in the guise of wanting personal fitness. My mind was a storm of strategy, a chessboard where every move had consequences. Every glance my husband threw my way was met with a calm, almost serene smile. Every word my best friend said around me was met with polite nods and quiet laughter. They thought I was oblivious, but inside I cataloged their voices, their plans, the subtle shifts in body language that revealed their true intentions. I remembered a phrase my mother used to say, "Maya, the calmest waters run the deepest." Now I understood what she meant. Calm could be armor. Observation could be weaponized. One evening, they tried subtle intimidation. My husband suggested a weekend getaway, just the two of us, to relax, to celebrate our future. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had seen too many thriller movies, read too many true crime accounts, and I knew this was no ordinary trip. But I smiled, agreed, and said, "Sounds perfect," all while plotting my own safety. I made sure friends knew where I'd be, left traces of our itinerary, and even sent an anonymous tip to a trusted acquaintance about potential danger. Every precaution felt like an armament I needed in a war I hadn't yet openly declared. And there was my friend. I had to interact with her, to act as though I hadn't seen the ultrasound, hadn't heard the late-night whispers. She hugged me, pretending everything was normal, but I detected a tremor in her hand. My smile never faltered. I learned to maintain eye contact, even as the world felt like it was crumbling around me. "You've got this, Maya," I whispered silently to myself, borrowing courage from some deep, hidden reservoir. Every laugh we shared, every casual conversation, was a mask I wore while the truth stewed underneath. I realized the human mind can adapt in terrifying ways when survival is on the line. I started noticing subtle attempts at manipulation. They offered gifts, expensive jewelry, even hints of affection, trying to confuse me, to make me doubt my perception. But I documented everything, logged dates, took photographs, and made mental notes. Each action, no matter how trivial, became a building block of evidence. I realized that while my heart was breaking, my mind was sharpening. I was learning not just to survive, but to turn the betrayal into a weapon, to ensure that when the time came, justice would not be blind. By the end of the month, I had a folder, physical and digital, cataloging their conspiracy in painful detail. Every call, every message, every subtle threat or hint of malice was recorded. I looked at it once and shivered, not from fear, but from recognition of the power I now held. I understood that I wasn't just a victim. I was a witness to their downfall. And with each passing day, as I acted normal, as I laughed and made polite conversation, I felt the scales tilt slowly in my favor. I had survived the first wave of shock, and now the stage was set for what would come next. The most important lesson I learned during that first month was the power of calm. Rage, fear, despair, they were all tools I could use if harnessed carefully. I realized that life could be cruel, that the people we loved the most could betray us, but that awareness, patience, and meticulous observation could transform despair into a weapon. I became almost invisible, yet completely present. I was preparing not just to survive, but to reclaim everything they thought they could steal. And deep down, I knew that when the time came, I would not just survive, I would triumph. The days turned into weeks, and I continued my careful surveillance, acting as though nothing had happened, my smile perfectly in place, even when my stomach twisted with anger and disgust. I developed a rhythm, a methodical approach to keeping my enemies close, while staying unseen. My husband and best friend, convinced I was blissfully ignorant, continued their plotting with reckless confidence. I began keeping a private journal, detailing everything I observed, whispered plans over champagne, coded messages in texts, The way my friend adjusted her posture, as if to hide something sinister. Every detail mattered. Every laugh they shared became another entry, a piece of the puzzle that would soon unravel their entire scheme. I remember one night clearly. My husband had a late meeting, supposedly at the office, but I noticed his shoes scuffed in a way that suggested a long drive. Using the small camera I had installed in the garage, I tracked his car to a deserted location outside the city. My heart pounded, but I didn't panic. I simply noted the plate number, recorded the license in my log, and returned to my routine as if nothing had happened. Later, I found the same location mentioned in a text between him and my friend meet at the usual spot. Tonight's the night. My stomach clenched. They were planning the final act. I had to act faster than they expected, but not recklessly. That would be my mistake, and they were already counting on it. I found subtle hints of their attempt to poison me. My favorite wine, usually tucked away in the cellar, had been tampered with, a faint chemical scent lingering if I sniffed closely. I smiled inwardly, pretending to sip it during dinner, while mentally cataloging the act. I made discreet calls to trusted friends who could intervene if things went wrong, left breadcrumbs of information in anonymous tips to local authorities, and quietly reinforced my own escape route. They had underestimated me completely, and I intended to make sure that miscalculation would cost them everything. There was something almost poetic about the irony. I was quietly documenting murder attempts while they gossiped openly about their plan to take my life. Every conversation became a test of their overconfidence. When they tried to engage me in small talk about the future or family plans, I responded with feigned interest, smiling politely, all the while observing the microexpressions, the twitch of the lip, the tightening of hands. These were the cracks that gave away the truth. I began predicting their moves with almost eerie precision. It was as if they were performing a dance, and I was memorizing every step to use against them at the exact moment they thought I was vulnerable. The calm I maintained was not passive, it was electric, charged with anticipation and resolve. At home, I set subtle traps of my own. I moved things around in ways that would reveal their meddling, leaving subtle marks in hidden corners, all of which I would later present as evidence. My journal grew heavy with documentation, photographs, voice recordings, screenshots, every late-night rendezvous, every plan whispered over text. Every malicious glance became a line in the story of my survival. I began to see the narrative as a game of chess. I was no longer just a pawn. I was the strategist, quietly steering the outcome while they thought they were in control. There were nights I almost lost my composure. I would sit in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what they were doing, imagining the life they wanted to take from me. But then I reminded myself that anger was dangerous, unless wielded carefully. I visualized the outcome I wanted, them exposed, my life intact, my inheritance untouched, my peace of mind reclaimed. I whispered to myself, "It's okay to feel fear, Maya, but use it. Turn it into clarity." That mantra became a lifeline, helping me navigate every calculated move without giving away my awareness. I also had to play the social role of the unsuspecting wife and friend. At brunch, I laughed with them, commented on trivial things, and shared stories from my day. My friend, convinced she had me fooled, would sometimes lean in too close, speaking of future schemes, as though I were part of the plan. I nodded, smiled, asked innocuous questions, all while mentally recording every syllable. These moments, seemingly casual, were the threads I would later weave into an unbreakable case. Their arrogance blinded them to the danger in my silence, and that would be their undoing. One particular night stands out. They whispered about an accident, something involving a winding road, a car, and tampered brakes. My pulse jumped, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly returned to my journal, detailing every word. I made discreet calls to anonymous hotlines and left information that could reach the authorities without revealing my identity. I even left small traceable signs that would point investigators to my husband if the plan moved forward. The more I observed, the more I realized that fear was a tool, and knowledge was my weapon. They had plotted my death without considering that I was fully awake to every move. I found myself revisiting old memories, thinking of simpler times with my friend, and feeling a strange mix of grief and rage. There was a time when trust was easy, when laughter wasn't laced with suspicion. Now, everything was different. But I learned to transform that grief into vigilance. I honed my senses to catch subtle cues, the slight hesitation in a step, the change in voice pitch, the micro-expression that gave away intent. I became hyper-aware, almost predatory in my observation, yet calm on the surface. The disguise was key. Every smile, every nod, every casual gesture was part of the strategy. They tried to manipulate me further, with gifts and promises, thinking I could be swayed or distracted. A necklace here, a lavish dinner there. But I accepted these gestures as if they were mere courtesies, cataloging them quietly, noting the dates, times, and locations. Each gift became a footnote in the ledger of betrayal, each word a record of intent. I realized that appearing normal was just as important as taking precaution. My calm demeanor was a shield, protecting me while their plans advanced blindly. Weeks passed, and I refined my exit strategies. I prepared alternate routes for travel, left clues with trusted friends, and even practiced quick escapes from my home in case the situation escalated. I balanced observation with preparation, ensuring I was ready for any eventuality. The more they plotted, the more confident I became in my control. They had underestimated the depth of my resolve, the sharpness of my mind, and the patience I had cultivated through weeks of careful monitoring. Every small action I took, the recording of a phone call, the noting of a suspicious meeting, the strategic smile at dinner, built a mosaic of evidence that would ultimately protect me. I wasn't just documenting betrayal, I was constructing a fortress of foresight. By pretending to be oblivious, I turned their overconfidence into their downfall. The calm, silent surveillance had transformed me from victim to strategist. I had become the eye of the storm, observing the chaos around me, while remaining untouchable, untangled in their web of lies. By the end of this period, I had created a meticulous record, a blueprint for exposing them. I knew the exact night, the precise plan they had in mind, and the precise moment when their arrogance would seal their fate. I had not confronted them, had not shown fear, had not given away a single clue. Instead, I had played the perfect silent game, gathering evidence, documenting attempts on my life, preparing the authorities, and ensuring my ultimate safety. The calm, deliberate patience I had cultivated over weeks made me ready for the final act, their exposure and their reckoning. The night they finally decided to act was cold and still, a deceptive quiet that seemed to echo the danger lurking in their mind. My husband and my best friend had planned the accident meticulously, a winding cliff road, a car with sabotaged brakes, a scenario that should have ended my life and paved the way for their inheritance dreams. I, however, was not inside the car. I had left subtle signs with the authorities, anonymous tips carefully crafted to expose their intentions without revealing my hand. I watched from a distance, my heart steady, my mind sharp, knowing that the culmination of weeks of observation and planning would finally bear fruit. It began innocuously. My husband had pretended to leave the house for a routine errand, checking the rearview mirror as he went, confident that I remained unaware. My friend followed in her car, excitement and anticipation radiating from her posture, convinced that the plan was flawless. They had forgotten one critical detail, that I had prepared the groundwork for their failure. Each movement they made was captured,
every interaction documented, every touch point logged for the authorities. I silently whispered to myself, "Patience, Maya, this is what you've been waiting for." Even as adrenaline surged, my face remained composed, the calm mask I had perfected over weeks, unbroken. When they reached the cliff road, the brakes failed, just as planned, but there was no victim inside. Instead, the police arrived moments later, guided by my anonymous tip. My husband's fingerprints were discovered on the tampered brake line, evidence that could not be fabricated or explained away. I watched as officers blocked the road, their presence a silent but undeniable declaration of justice. Panic registered first on my husband's face, then disbelief, and finally pure terror as the realization of his exposure sank in. My friend tried to intervene, to explain, to plead, but the evidence was too precise, too damning, and they were arrested together. The betrayal they thought was hidden for weeks was now out in the open, and the world bore witness. Standing at my balcony that evening, I sipped my wine, letting the cool liquid soothe the remnants of tension in my body. My inheritance remained intact, untouched, safeguarded by careful planning and unwavering vigilance. But my satisfaction was not born of relief alone. It was the triumph of foresight, intelligence, and resilience. I had turned what could have been a tragedy into a lesson in strategy, patience, and personal power. The quiet revenge, executed with meticulous precision, was far more satisfying than any impulsive act of confrontation could have been. As the news spread, whispers of scandal reached our social circles. Friends and acquaintances were shocked, some incredulous, some quietly impressed. They didn't know the half of it, of course, but they saw the end result: a betrayal exposed, justice served, and a life reclaimed. Even my closest friends, who had feared the worst for me, watched from a distance as I walked through my home with steady steps, serene and unshaken. I smiled politely at neighbors who approached, answering questions lightly, masking the profound depth of the battle I had fought quietly, without a single soul knowing the danger I had navigated daily. I spent the next few days reviewing the aftermath, ensuring that all loose ends were tied. Lawyers handled the inheritance details, insurance, and banking matters, and the authorities processed the evidence I had collected. Every step of their plan had been anticipated, and every potential loophole closed before it could be exploited. I realized that my calm observation and meticulous documentation had not just saved my life, they had protected my future, my autonomy, and my peace of mind. The power of preparation had transformed fear into security, and betrayal into actionable knowledge. Even amidst the chaos of exposure and arrest, I found small moments of reflection that reminded me of life's fragility and complexity. I remembered when I had first discovered the pregnancy, the initial shock, the hollow ache in my chest, and how far I had come since then. I had navigated deception, danger, and the darkest reaches of human treachery, all while maintaining composure and foresight. Those lessons were indelible, shaping not only my response to this particular betrayal, but my approach to every challenge that life might throw in my path. In a quiet moment, I allowed myself a flash of humor. I thought of Aunt Mabel baking cookies at midnight, oblivious to the world, and I smiled at the absurdity of ordinary life against the backdrop of the extraordinary danger I had. It was a gentle reminder that even in the most intense circumstances, life's small, familiar rhythms could still provide grounding. My friends' jokes, my morning coffee routine, the way the sunlight hit my balcony, all of it became evidence that life could continue, and that resilience and awareness allowed one to enjoy it fully, even after betrayal. Later, I found myself reflecting on trust, loyalty, and personal strength. My husband and my best friend had violated every bond I had held sacred, Yet I had transformed that violation into an opportunity to assert control, to reclaim my life. I realized that revenge, when executed with patience and intelligence, was not about cruelty, but about restoration, restoring balance, justice, and dignity. I felt a serene satisfaction, knowing that their exposure was complete, unassailable, and permanent. Their downfall was a testament to my foresight, my calm, and my refusal to act impulsively, even when the stakes had been life itself. I also considered the psychological dimension of their downfall, the terror in my husband's eyes, the disbelief etched across my friend's face as they were escorted by police, the unraveling of their shared fantasy of domination. All of it underscored a lesson I had internalized early on. Arrogance blinds the schemer. They had assumed that secrecy equated to safety, that their plans would remain hidden. Because of my initial shock and grief, they had underestimated the power of quiet observation, of patience and intelligence. They had assumed that fear would paralyze me. They were wrong, completely wrong. In the weeks that followed, I carefully resumed the routines of my life, savoring the small victories, enjoying a peaceful dinner alone, revisiting favorite books, indulging in evening walks along familiar streets. I allowed myself to feel joy, but always with awareness. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, selectively, and I began to surround myself with individuals who valued honesty, integrity, and care. I learned to accept that betrayal was not always preventable, but that the response to it could define one's character and future. I had chosen strategy over despair, preparation over panic, and now I could enjoy the quiet dignity, standing, finally, in the serenity of my home. I reflected on the full arc of events: discovery, shock, careful observation, silent planning, exposure, and triumph. I understood that my strength, not just in surviving, but in orchestrating a resolution that was complete, precise, and morally just. I had turned what could have been devastation into empowerment. I had watched the most intimate bonds of trust betray me, but I had used that knowledge to craft an outcome that honored my life, my agency, and my future. I lifted my glass one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. There was a beauty in the calm, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that justice had been served. My inheritance was secure, my life was mine, and the people who had sought to destroy me were no longer a threat. I whispered to myself, softly but firmly, "You've got this, always, you've got this." I understood, finally, that true strength comes from patience, clarity, and careful action, and that sometimes the most profound victories are the ones orchestrated in silence, with precision, intelligence. Moral lesson: life will sometimes betray you in ways you cannot foresee, even by the closest people. But strength is not in rushing anger or revenge. It is in observation, patience, and careful, deliberate action. Maya's story shows that calm awareness and intelligence can turn despair into triumph and danger into empowerment. Trust may be broken, but resilience and foresight can safeguard your future. Love yourself enough to act wisely, even when others act maliciously. Every challenge carries a lesson, every betrayal an opportunity to rise stronger. Your life, your peace, and your dignity are worth protecting with patience.